And now to continue our reading about the Boom of Swankirk. The facts. Unable to find a capitalist to put up the necessary amount of money for working capital, Mr. Haybecker, the mine owner and engineer, got in touch with the so-called Wara Exchange Association, W-A-R-A, Wara Exchange Association, which was putting into practice in a limited manner the principles which the new economic school of free economy or neo-economy advocated. The Wara Exchange Association issued, in exchange of ordinary money, a new kind of money taking the place of the former, but which could not be withheld from circulation. This money could not interrupt the exchange of goods and services, and thereby contract production and create unemployment and poverty. This new economic school also taught that the amount of such actively circulating money, representing in its totality effective demand on the market, should be regulated, adapted to the volume of products on the market, supply, in such a way as to maintain equilibrium between supply and demand, between production and distribution, as indicated by the stability of the price level. Mr. Haybecker asked the Wara Exchange Association, issuing to its members such an unhoardable medium of exchange called Wara, and which by that time they had put into circulation in dozens of cities, for a loan of 50,000 units. One Wara was priced 1 Reichmark, placing the proposal before the people. Then Mr. Haybecker called his unemployed miners together and told them that they could start work the next day if they so wished, although he had no money, no legal tender for wages, but, he said, he would give them a substitute, something which would be just as good if they only accepted it. He showed them the brown slips of paper, and they replied, "Well, as long as it is okay with the butcher, grocer, tailor, shoemaker, etc., it is okay with us too." Then Mr. Haybecker approached the business people with his proposition to accept the Wara in place of regular money. They, with all due respect to Mr. Haybecker, refused to give their good wares for brown paper slips. Therefore, Mr. Haybecker was compelled to establish a canteen, getting its supplies from warehouses which had been accepting Wara for some time, and where the workers could secure almost all of the things needed for their livelihood. Men and money begin to work. The miners went to work producing coal, and hundreds of families were supplied with a living. After a few weeks, the business and tradespeople of the town came and complained to Mr. Haybecker that he had absorbed all the little business they once had, and also asked for more information about the Wara. He explained that Wara would work just as well with them, that the wages of the workers would go to the baker, butcher, grocer, hardware store, farmer, and vice versa, and that it would remain in perfect circulation all the time, exchanging their services and products, and that by continuous producing and selling and buying, they could gradually enjoy increasing prosperity that would naturally result. Getting rich by work was, after all, the only solid foundation of prosperity. Getting rich by work was, after all, the only solid foundation of prosperity. Big-hearted by nature and convinced of the truth of his cause, Mr. Habecker promised that if wara should accumulate here and there in too large amounts to dispose of, the Wara Exchange Association would exchange it for legal tender. After some hesitation, the businessmen agreed to accept the wara. Mr. Habecker closed the canteen for their benefit, and from that time on the economic boom grew in this region and began to expand into neighboring districts. The wara note. It is necessary to know that a wara consists of a note having the peculiarity of depreciating a fixed amount monthly, for example, a half or 1% of the face value. The holder has to affix, on the date due, a stamp, after which the note passes at its full value for another month. The arrangement can be made for weekly or semi-monthly or any other periodical depreciation. The method can also be applied without affixing stamps by periodical withdrawal of the current issue and its substitution by a new issue against payment of a small discount, which will cause people not to hoard the money. A procedure which was applied for almost 300 years with only coins in use. During the period of 1150 and 1450, all over Europe, and which brought about the 3 centuries of economic boom and great cultural rise. See number 3 of this series of 10-cent booklets on the neo-economic teachings, Man's Most Glorious Epoch, the Gothic, the Key to the Problems of Our Times, and also number 4 of the same series, Signal and Guide to the Post-War World, the Economic Miracle of Wurgel, both of which I have and I will be reading them. Unhoardable money did it. Its effects. Unhoardable money did it. Its effects. These different kinds of demurrage money have all the same effects. They impel the holder of the note or coin to avoid hoarding it and to put it into circulation out of self-interest for buying products or paying wages, debts, services, and for establishing credits by loaning and investing. Demurrage money, such as wara, is not a money that can paralyze production and distribution, as our traditional money does, by withdrawing from circulation. Demurrage money does not throw man out of employment, thereby robbing him of his opportunities to produce, to create. Demurrage money does not contract business and trade, and thereby create economic depression. Demurrage money is a true medium of exchange, a perfect functioning money serving unconditionally instead of making its service in the form of surplus money dependent on the granting of interest. It therefore makes for economic expansion up to capacity production. While idle money makes idle men, demurrage money, active money, permits men to be as active as they want to be. To the full extent of the volume issued, such money represents demand which, by regulating the volume in circulation, can be adapted to the size of supply, the goods on the markets, so that economic equilibrium, ensuring a stable price level and a stable value of money, can be realized under all conditions, even with capacity production, which needs simply be matched with an adequate volume of distributing demurrage money. To repeat, demurrage money is a true medium of exchange. A perfect functioning money serving unconditionally instead of making its service in the form of surplus money dependent on the granting of interest. It therefore makes for economic expansion up to capacity production, while idle money makes idle men. Demurrage money, active money, permits men to be as active as they want to be. To the full extent of the volume issued, such money represents demand, which, by regulating the volume in circulation, can be adapted to the size of supply, the goods on the markets, so that economic equilibrium, ensuring a stable price level and a stable value of money, can be realized under all conditions, even with capacity production, which needs simply be matched with an adequate volume of distributing demurrage money. Wara, the money made equivalent to wares. Demurrage money, such as wara, is like the perishable wares which it has to exchange and from which it gets its name. All wares are under the natural urge to be exchanged, distributed, sold, as they are not made for personal use by the producer, but for exchange, and if retained, cause loss through perishability, storage fee, technical progress, change of fashion, etc. Natural law forces wares into the exchange because of their unhoardability, and wara was a money subjected to the same urge, thereby establishing harmony between wares and wara, between products and the medium of exchange, and thereby between the seller and the buyer. And this compliance with natural law has the most amazing beneficial consequences. It makes possible the natural conditions that man can work as much as he wants and thus produce all the wealth he wants to have without restriction. Thus, this kind of money becomes the key to permanent prosperity and to the solution of the economic problems. How did the people judge wara? Let us visit the Swankirk of the early 30s. Ask the workers what they think of these depreciating money tokens, and they will tell you that they never want another money again, that they practically have to pay no depreciation, but their wara goes quickly to the grocer, butcher, baker, etc., to the creditors to pay bills, or to the savings bank to establish credits, where in turn it must be put into circulation to buy, pay, loan, and invest. Ask the businessmen, and they will tell you that in years they did not have the amount of business that they have now with wara. But what about paying the depreciation? We gladly pay the 1% monthly demurrage when due on what is in our cash register. However, after all, we do not pay it from our own pocket, but from the tremendous increase of business. So in fact, we are not paying it at all. The only tax stimulating business. The consumer does not pay it. The businessman does not pay it, except from the increase of his business. And the government, if demurrage money is nationally introduced, would get a revenue from the only tax which, by its very nature, is in fact business creating instead of business hampering. The only tax officially asked to avoid. Of course, self-interest causes everybody to try to escape the tax by putting the bills rapidly into circulation. But that is the purpose of this tax, to be escaped from. The perpetuum mobile of business. We businessmen are now paying our employees with it, and due to its spreading acceptance, can now secure almost all our needed stock of merchandise with it. In our district, the Wara has displaced almost completely the use of legal tender money. Wara is the perfect money. It is the genuine medium of exchange which finds its complete covering in the goods on the markets offered for exchange, for sale. And it is the relationship between the volume of products and the volume of money holding demand for products which decides the value of money, its price, as measured in goods. If Mr. Habecker had found another money lender with the traditional money, there would have been a short revival of business until his money had again seeped into the channels of idle capital and remained hidden like the rest. We have experienced this several times under the various owners of the mine. But it is different with Wara. Wara is the perpetuum mobile of business. It permits, by its regulation, a depression-proof economy with capacity production. It is, when nationally adopted, the permanent solution of the problem of depression. Traditional money refuses, in its form as surplus money, capital, to circulate whenever the interest tribute is not guaranteed. Traditional money refuses, in its form as surplus money, capital, to circulate whenever the interest tribute is not guaranteed. This always has the effect of stopping further growth of the volume of real capital goods. In this way, the depression, with its disastrous consequences, is initiated. Thus, every boom leads with traditional money automatically to depression. With the capital strike on, prices fall and business becomes impossible. The compulsory circulation of money, however, causes the entire volume of the money issued to be effective demand, and thus permits the permanent maintenance of economic equilibrium simply by regulation of the volume of money in issue. All goods are subject to the law of perishability or depreciation, or entail storage costs, etc. They stand under the natural urge to be exchanged, sold. But traditional, hoardable money does not. And yet, for harmony, equity, justice, it should stand under the same urge to circulate, invest. Only then can demand be matched with supply, and production continue as long as man has unsatisfied wants and desires. Thus spoke the enlightened people of Swankirk. To be continued.